Let's do it.
Let's do this thing. Well,
good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to a Monday night edition, the first Monday night edition of You Can't Brew That on Television.
We're changing things up a little bit. We're changing some of our broadcasting capabilities, try to eliminate some of the problems we've had before. Hopefully the quality of the feed's a little better this time, and hopefully everything sounds a little better this time. And
we're doing away with the technical difficulties for now.
So yeah, this time we didn't have our little spot intro because we got Richard doing a little different kind of engineering and producing from the background, and we're going to be running the show from our laptop. So I may be looking a little more down at the screen every now and again, but we'll get through it.
And so here we are tonight and from now on every Monday, helping you bridge the gap between frat boy and beer snob.
That's right, and we're going to bridge the gap tonight with Lobotomy Bock.
Lobotomy Bock. And I'm going to be straight with everybody in our audience. I am under doctor's orders not to drink beer. But I'm going to have a sip for the show. Sorry, Dr. Perkins, if you're watching. I am going to have a sip just so that I can just be honest with you guys, and I'm going to taste the beer. So I just wanted to make sure everybody knew what was going on before we get started.
Well, they call this one a Southern German Doppelbock, but I guess they call it the Lobotomy Bock because they managed to get it to almost 11% alcohol. I don't know. I tried one before the show, and I've had one at another time.
I did some research on this beer, and I found an awful lot of people questioning the amount of alcohol in this beer.
I would be one to agree with that. Although it kind of has an alcoholic residual nature to it, it just doesn't come out in the nose.
No, there's definitely no alcohol in the nose. It's got a nice aroma.
A little caramel, a little chocolate.
Yeah, there's
almost
like a Tootsie Roll in there. There's some kind of dried fruit maybe.
All right, so it's just a really light flavor. You get a little bit of that chocolate.
It's fizzy.
Yeah,
it's very, very well carbonated.
Yeah, it's not bad.
Yeah, it's carbonated like my cousin's beer was.
Yeah, similar.
Maybe not that bad, but yeah, it's definitely kind of fizzy in the mouth. It's got a nice malty taste to it.
Chair squeaking. So one thing I wanted to mention, I've been always read a book or two about beer and keep something on the shelf for when I'm flying or trying to hit the sack and catch some Z's. So this time I've been reading a common book. A lot of people have read it. It's called Radical Brewing. And Radical Brewing is actually a really cool book. And it mentioned something about tasting beers that I thought was incredible. Basically, it didn't have a whole lot on the subject. It was only a few pages long in the chapter. But one thing that it mentioned was that when you smell something and when you taste something, the smell more predominantly, you're often associating multiple parts of your brain, and you'll actually get memories coming into your head of what that reminds you of. And when you get something like that, it'll come up first. That'll be before you're able to go, this smells like chocolate, this smells like that. You're going to get that first and go, Grandma's house, 1986, we had my first Tootsie Roll. And that's the kind of stuff that really helps you with learning to taste a beer, is trusting your instincts and what you're tasting. So
that's something interesting. I'd never considered that before.
Yeah, and I read that and I thought, oh, that's why. And that's why with a lot of things, you have like a bad experience with a certain food or a certain item, a certain smell, and so therefore you never want to have that again, or it always comes into your head whenever you smell it. You go, oh man, that's awful. Well, that's one of those things that here, just for everybody out there.
Oh God, that is awful.
So yeah, that's what you get when you get one of those smells. For me, it's like nail polish remover. That type of a really direct, like bitter type, rubbing alcohol, isopropyl alcohol smell. It just kills me, man. Just sends me right to nauseous. So it's kind of interesting how that kind of a smell will trigger something. So a beer may taste fine, but that high fusel alcohols will kick in and you'll smell that and you'll be like, oh man, I just don't like that, because it reminds you of something bad. It can be the best tasting beer in the world, but not for you because of that. Pretty cool.
And what's the name of this book?
It's Radical Brewing. I think I had it.
How
sitting around here
far
somewhere.
into it are you?
It's Randy Mosier. I'm about a third of the way, maybe halfway through it.
So can we expect a book review at the
Oh
very
yeah,
end?
yeah, we'll talk
Excellent.
about it. And I've skipped through the book a little bit. I used part of it to malt our own part of the kilning, basically caramelizing your own malt is in there, and we used that when we did our wheat beer.
A lot of these home brewing books too, for those of you out there that are going to try to read these, a lot of them are very reference heavy. So I know, like, reading Designing Great Beers, you can definitely read the prose, but there's an awful lot of charts and tables and things like that you're just not going to remember.
Skip over them. You can always look back at them later.
But you know where they are.
Yeah.
And so when you go to sit down to design a beer, or when you're in the middle of brewing and something goes wrong or whatever, you'll know off the top of your head where those tables were. You won't necessarily know what was in them, but you'll know where to go look.
So, in the future, if you smell a beer and you go, "Oh, that smells like Bono," just push it back, send it back, get your money back.
That's bad news.
That's something. Acetaldehyde, maybe? Look, no,
I don't know.
it's something.
So,
What are we talking about today?
I understand you have some trivia.
I very much have some trivia. I'm going to load it up. We'll see, based on... Tell us what you're talking about first while I'm loading this up. What are we going to be discussing tonight?
Tonight we're going to be doing another sort of beginner's topic. We're going to be talking a lot about hops.
Okay.
Talk about different ways to get hops into your beer. And we're going to talk about triple hopping.
Triple hopping.
I don't know if we'll have time for triple hopping.
For all three? We'll maybe only have time for double hopping?
Yeah, for maybe just double hopping. But we are going to talk about when you're going to add hops to the boil for what you want out of the hops. We're going to talk about what sort of flavors and aromas you're going to get out of different hops. And we're also going to talk about the different ways that hops are going to come to you from the store, and kind of advantages and disadvantages of each. And they all do. And we also dug up some fun facts about hops, just different uses that they have other than in beer.
And so in your research, you may have actually gotten to my question here. But let's see. My question is, what was the most common bittering agent used just prior to hops becoming prevalent in 1500?
I did not come across that.
Really? Okay.
My first get, I feel like I've read this before though. I'm gonna say it's holly. No, hemlock. Didn't somebody use hemlock in
We'll
their
see.
beer?
We'll wait and we'll see if our studio audience can answer it correctly later, because Bono cannot.
Bono cannot. So for those of you out there who are going to internet cheat this as we speak, or for those of you out there who just know, what was the most common bittering agent used before hops became prevalent?
Yep. Actually, before hops became mandated in some parts of the Germanic areas.
No!
All right, we are without our banner now. We had technical difficulties.
Thanks a lot, High Point, North Carolina.
It was fun while it lasted.
Moving on to hops. Kyle, there's a lot of different ways you can put hops into the boil.
For sure.
Or after the boil.
Or before the boil.
Or before the boil. So let's kind of talk about the different times you're going to put hops in.
Okay.
You can throw hops into the mash.
You can.
What's that going to do for you?
Hops in the mash, you're going to get more of the flavor compounds, but you're going to get just a subtle bitterness from it. It's not really going to be able to take in a lot of what the bittering alpha acids can give you, because you actually have to boil them to release those. So what you're going to get from that may actually be more of what the plant tastes like beyond the bitter. So it's going to be subtle. Hard to get a lot of the flavor and a lot of the bitterness. So it's pretty cool, though. I haven't tried it, but I've tried beers that have done that before. It's really interesting.
It's something we've talked about it when developing recipes. We've talked about it for several of our recipes and just never followed through with it. So, well, one of these days we'll give it a go.
Yeah, for sure.
But until then, we're going to talk about some of the more common times to put hops in, and obviously the biggest one. Well, not obviously if you don't know, but the biggest one is at the very beginning of the boil. What's going to happen is the acids of the oils that are in your hops, those are what the oils actually give your hop aroma and your hop flavor, and the acids actually produce the bitterness. So the longer you boil the hop, the more the oils kind of get. Do they actually boil off, or do they just?
They precipitate, and
Yeah,
it's just like anything. They'll precipitate, and they'll diminish and break apart into smaller particles.
And then the acids are what's left over, and
Right.
that's where your bittering comes from.
So the bittering comes from, they call it lupulin. It's just like a little gland inside the hop plant. And so that's where the bitterness comes from. And there's a range between about 30 minutes and 60 minutes of boil where that's where you're going to release most of the bittering. And you're not going to get much residual flavor. You're not going to get much residual aroma at all.
Very, very little to none.
It's just where you're going to get the underlying bitterness. And what is the underlying bitterness? What's the difference in that?
The underlying bitterness is what you really sense with the back of your tongue, rather than what you're tasting and what you're smelling. Kyle talked earlier about smell and taste being so closely related, and really the bittering is more perceived, I think, than tasted.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think bitterness comes in more at like the back end of the drink, so it settles into the flavor profile in a more subtle way. It's kind of like when you have lactose sugar and it comes on the tongue in a creamy way. This just hits the mouth in a drying, more bitter way.
And so the longer you boil, the more you're going to get that bittering. Then, Kyle, what are you going to get when you use a little bit, let's say 15 to 30 minutes? What's going to come out of that?
The 15 to 30 minute range, what comes out there is the aroma, the flavor of the hops. So you're actually going to dissolve the really tiny, hard to keep aroma particles within a few minutes, but the flavor will stay in there in that range, 15 to 30 minutes. And different amounts and different types of the flavors will last for different times. So the difference between putting hops in at 25 minutes and putting it in at 15 may be huge for the flavor. You may get the most of the floral character of a hop and none of the citrus, and just depending on how long you boil it. It's pretty cool.
Because some varieties of hop do offer multiple flavor profiles, and so you might boil it a shorter time or a longer time to draw out whatever flavor profile you're going for. And then we talked a little bit about aroma.
Yep.
So as you get closer to the end of the boil, the lower amount of time you boil your hop, the more the oils are going to stay in there, and you're getting more aroma, and you're still getting flavor.
You get some flavor
towards the end.
Yep.
But the shorter amount of time you boil that hop, the more aroma you're getting.
And very little bitterness, because it doesn't
Very
have
little.
time to convert any of the lupulin into usable acids. So yeah, you get very little bittering, but the smell, that's when it really comes into play.
So when you put, let's say you go and you get a Stone Cala Belgique, or you get a Ruination, and you put that to your mouth, and before you can even drink it, you just take a breath, and the aroma of the hops just like attacks you.
Yeah.
Where does that come from?
That comes from, well, it depends on which one you're talking about there. Likely with the big ones, like the Hop Stupid or the Ruination, you're going to get a lot of that from what's called a hop back. And that means that's beyond just aroma and beyond putting something in with the last 5 minutes, or at flame out, they call it, when you're shutting off the boil. You're putting it in just so that it's cooling with the wort. Well, a hop back, they'll actually pump the cooling wort through hops. So they'll go through at different stages and go through and be pumped through brand new fresh hops ready to go. And it's a pretty cool system. People rig up all kinds of crazy things. I've seen them, local homebrew places. A lot of people in the homebrew clubs will make something out of the whole house filters that you'll see.
I think this is the best IPA I've ever had. Was at the Blue Bonnet last year, where they actually filtered the beer through a filter of Cascade hops on its way from the keg to your cup, and
Right.
it was amazing.
They actually served it through there. They did not give us a hop garnish, which I was really upset about.
They didn't. Yeah, that would have been really nice.
I've always wanted to have
a little umbrella made of hops.
I was actually having the idea the other day that instead of having a hop back system, that you have like a widget for hops, and it'd be like a little small capsule inside your beer, and then when it opens up, it starts spraying hops into your beer. I think that'd be a lot of fun.
A lot of craft brewers, and you're seeing this so much on the west coast of the U.S., they're just getting so creative with how they add hops, and especially your west coast brewers, they're just trying to jam as many hops as they possibly can into every single glass. Which a couple years ago actually drove prices through the roof because there was a worldwide hop shortage.
Yeah, there was some drought due to global warming, and now that there's so much rain due to global warming, it's been a lot better for hops.
So now that we we haven't talked about dry hopping.
Dry hopping is another alternative beyond what we talked about.
It's a little bit more of an accessible method to get aroma than
a hop
because
back.
not every home brewer has the capabilities and the tools to do a hop back.
I mean, anybody can do a system where they run their wort through after their chiller or during their chiller or some way, run it through a whole house filter filled with hops. And you can make your own hop back system like that, but it's a lot of work, and it's only for the one time you brew an IPA that's really big out of the year, if that. And so, yeah, the other way is to just dry hop it, which is usually done in the secondary. Some people use different types of hops. I think the most preferred is to use the actual whole leaf hop, and a whole leaf hop won't degrade as much. I think the most common way people use hops these days is pellets. Something we'll talk about here in a little bit.
We'll talk about the differences here.
We use nothing but whole hops. It's just how we like to make our beers. Just a preference. Everybody has their preference. So yeah, you just take those and you put them in like a hop sock, which is just basically a loose knit little bag that you can tie up. Toss it right in your secondary. Secondary is a good spot for it because most beers will have 4, 5, 6% alcohol by then, at least, if it's not a really big beer.
Mm-hmm.
And there's hardly anything that will get infected through that situation. So, yeah, it's a really good way. It adds a lot of aroma, some flavor to it. It's pretty cool.
I think we're about to, are we going to dry hop the English here pretty quick?
Yeah, I'd like to dry hop the English IPA. We just did a couple beers back a little while ago, did the English IPA, and we did an Irish Red. And they both kicked some butt in the fermenters. They're still going strong. There's still a little crossing on top of that English IPA. The Irish is thoroughly looking good. It's ready to go. We could rack that in any time.
So for those of you in the area, we're going to have some brand new beers on tap here pretty quick. And until then, we should probably talk about the different ways you can buy hops from the store because, as Kyle just mentioned, we prefer whole leaf hops. And a lot of it really just comes down to preference, what system you're using and whatnot. But there are subtle differences between the different ways you can get hops. So really, the main methods are you can get whole leaf hops, you can get pellet hops, which are essentially mechanically ground and pressed into like rabbit food.
Yeah, it looks like rabbit
looks
food
an
or
awful
gerbil
lot.
food.
Yeah. And this is not very common and a little bit expensive, you can actually get hop extract and hop oils. You can actually buy those directly in a bottle.
And there's also hop plugs.
There are also hop plugs. Not as commonly used.
It's hard to
I don't
find.
think.
Yeah. It's kind of a cross between pellets and whole hops. It's kind of like if you're going to plug it, you might as well
pick
pellet
one or
it.
the other.
Yeah. But there's differences in the efficiencies per ounce because most of the things, when you're talking at the scale of a home brewer, you're measuring in ounces. So you may have 4 or 5 ounces in a home brew, depending on when you put it in. Maybe less, maybe more, but somewhere in that range. And when you put that stuff in there as pellets, you'll probably get about 20% more efficiency, something along those lines.
And one important thing to note is that when you're looking, if you look at pellets and whole leaves of the same hop, a lot of times you're going to see that the whole leaves have a higher alpha acid rating.
Yeah,
and so even though the pellets are technically more efficient, you start with more alpha acids in the whole leaf because you don't lose any of the lupulin glands to crushing.
Yeah, because you're talking about these tiny little beads basically of that are waiting to be extracted for bitterness, and so when you're pushing them and grinding them and crunching them into their shape, then you're going to brain a few of them.
And the efficiency is definitely there a lot more with the pellets, and that is because there's more surface area to the pellets, and there's a lot more contact time. Now, when you look at the whole leaf, and this is where preference really starts to enter into it, is that whole leaf hops are definitely they're definitely easier to filter out. And so when you're pouring,
These are good pictures.
are they good pictures?
Yeah.
Good. When you're pouring from the boil keg to the fermenter, you're gonna have a much easier time with whole leaf hops.
This is just showing you exactly what they are. They come off a plant, and they look like little mini pine cones when they're on a plant. And those little mini pine cones are very bitter and very tasty. And so, yeah, it looks like cereal. I want to eat them up right now. I love hops. I love hoppy beer.
There's a time there where I was kind of obsessed with hops, where I was drinking all the ruination and hop stupid that I could possibly find.
This is a pellet hop that we were talking about before. And you can grab these, and you see how they're just ground into, looks like the nuggets on a golf course, like when they aerate the golf course. So, right, Bono? From all
That's
the times
right.
you've played
It looks
golf?
just like the nuggets on the golf courses that I always play at.
All right, so Bono doesn't play golf. Good to know. Good to know. See if I can find our hops. When we were growing them back at the old house, I'll be able to find them here somewhere, but
And for those of you who are interested in growing your own hops at home, please remember that they are toxic to dogs.
yeah, they're toxic to
So-
dogs in large quantities. It's very unlikely that will happen, that you'll have something like that where the dogs will eat that much of it. Because you're talking about, you need to make like a 10-gallon batch, and all of the hops from that batch get put into a pile, and they decide to eat those. And what you'll find is most dogs won't eat hops. They're just not.
Most.
Yeah.
Just
But-
in case, though.
But if they see you doing something with it that looks edible, then they're dogs. They're going to
So-
do something, right?
So if you harvest your hops and they're sitting around and you happen to have one of those dogs that actually likes eating them, I'm fairly certain I have one living in my house who will eat anything. It's just something you'll want to be careful of. So
So here's the hops growing on the vine. You can see. I'll zoom way in so you can see just exactly what's going on the vine. A couple of the hop cones growing, and then I'll come back and we'll look at a little more. So yeah, you can see them growing there towards the left of your screen, different sizes. There was a lot more of them on different plants and different times. So the next thing that we'll look at will be actually a zoomed in one, assuming I have a picture like that, which I'm pretty sure I do. Yeah, that one's got plenty of hops on that picture. Well, that looks really bad.
So as we're starting to take a look at these, let's talk about how you need to store your hops. Because if you don't use them immediately, you do need to be careful about your hops becoming oxygenated.
Right. So there's one of them growing on the plant there. You can see it to the size of a brick. It kind of shows you how big they are. They're no more than the size of about a quarter.
And we made a beer with those homegrown hops.
Yeah, we did. It was
Okay.
pretty good.
Which one was it? The English?
I put it in the last English IPA we made.
Nice.
So yeah, I dumped every last bit of them. We had when we moved to our new house, we lost quite a bit. We tried to transplant the plants that had a bunch of hops on it. Probably had about 4 or 5 ounces of hops per plant, and they weren't ready to harvest yet. So we tried to dig up the plant, move it, and overnight the plant was dead. So we didn't have much of a chance of saving it. But
Hops grow very fast, and so they also die very fast.
And I've told some people, there's some other people in the community around here that grow hops, and it's a hobby in and of itself. You've got to like gardening and enjoy that part of it, or else it may not be that much fun for you. I know it was a lot more work than I anticipated, keeping bugs off of it and all that, but I think given the fact that we were putting it in an established garden, those bugs were already there. They knew where to go, so that made it a little different. But you plant them somewhere in the back corner of a house, usually on the south side of a house where if you can't do the south side of the house, the best place really is I'd say the east side of the house. But really you want about 8 to 10 hours of sunlight. And if you get more than that, they'll dry out a little bit. It's really hard in Texas to grow hops. I mean, most of them are grown at the 50th parallel in the state. So Washington and Oregon, they're about the biggest hop growers.
I know Yakima, Washington has some of the best hops.
Yeah.
And when I visited Sierra Nevada here a few months back, I noticed that they've got quite the hop garden up there in Northern California. They've got several acres surrounding their site.
And they make, I believe it's called the Estate that they
Yes.
dry hop, or excuse me, wet hop. The Estate's fantastic beer. It's another way to do hops, whereas most of them are dried out and brought to you and stored, like we're going to talk about here in a second. The other way is to take them straight off the vine. If you're going to grow them at your house, that's an awesome way to make a beer, because you don't test the alpha acids, you don't do any of that stuff. You just put them in your beer. Take a wild guess, make something that you're expecting and wanting hop flavor and bitterness, and just put it in there and see what you get. Nobody's ever going to be able to make a beer like that ever in their lives, because they don't have the soil like you have. They don't have your plant. It's, you got what you got. Pretty cool.
Absolutely.
Cool. And I guess I just hear that.
Great. Thanks a lot, Dave.
Growing hops yourself. That's we'll take a look at that later. I know a lot of
that's a very descriptive website name.
It definitely is. Wonder what they do there.
Yeah, that's a good question.
The problem with hop growing is that most people that grow hops do them in northern climates, and so the instructions are for northern climate people. If you're southern climate, if you're Texas especially, and you want to grow hops, just shoot us a line at one of our webcasts at doglakebrewery.com or one of our other contacts, and we'll be able to answer some of those questions or put you in contact with a few of the people around here who grow their own hops. And those people are very knowledgeable, and they'll tell you exactly how they do it. I know one person who has one hop plant, and one hop plant, you can at most get a pound. Well, a pound can be 2 beers, maybe, if you're using all that one hop.
Yeah, that's true.
It's really not that much hop. So he'll make, every year, he only gets usually about 6 to 8 ounces, and he just makes one wet hopped beer. Boom, there you go. So it's a pretty cool way to do it.
Probably tastes different every year.
Yeah, exactly.
So once you do get your hops, you do want to keep them from oxygenating, and the best way to do that is by vacuum packing them. And I think one of the pictures of the full leaf hops showed them vacuum packed. So what you're going to get when you vacuum pack your hops is it's just going to keep them fresher longer.
And we do this with ours. One good thing we'll do is we'll buy from places that allow you to buy like a whole pound of hops at a time. And when we open it up, we got them in the freezer all the time, because the colder you can get it, the better. And we'll take them out of the freezer and we'll vacuum seal it. And you can see they've got it written over here on the right side of it, what type it is, and there's 1 ounce of it. We'll basically do that. We won't weigh them the second time when we're done, but we'll write what the alpha acid is, and we'll write what the hop varietal is, and we'll put that stuff up on the bag. And if we got a whole pound, we'll leave like a bunch of room in the bag and cut just the tip off of it, pull what we need out for that brew, put it in the vacuum sealer, seal it right back up, shove it right back in the fridge. So we're good to go. Actually, freezer, but top portion of the fridge. Yeah. And we'll, we keep our hops for a lot longer that way, and you can buy them a lot cheaper buying them in bulk like that.
Absolutely. They're very expensive if you buy them in 1 and 2 ounce packages at the store.
Right. And that's a great way to do it if you want to experiment with hops. In fact, if you're going to make a beer of something you've never made before, that's the way to do it.
Or especially if you're using an unusual variety of hop, like if you're
making a style
like some Polish hop or something,
or like Northern Brewer.
There you go.
Yeah, when you're making a beer with something like Northern Brewer, that hop tastes like no other hop out there.
It's very unusual, and so especially the first time you use it, go light.
Yeah, go light.
Because
you
can make a very costly mistake.
Yeah, go buy an Anchor Steam, which uses Northern Brewer, to see if you like the taste and the bitterness from that hop. And if you do, then go buy a 1 ounce package, open it up. See what it smells like. See if that's really what you want in your beer. But
Dave writes in, and I'm sorry, that's actually our producer who says that some guy was selling little bags of hops down here by his apartment.
Oh, really?
So yeah, I think I saw somebody selling hops downtown the other night. I should have grabbed him and checked out his prices.
Those of you who don't know,
Hops is very closely related to marijuana,
Yeah, they're cousin plants actually.
which is a nice
It's
segue.
like Puerto Ricans and Cubans.
That's
right.
which is a nice segue into the interesting info I dug up on hops. Apparently, herbalists and hippies are really into hops because of their soothing properties. In fact, it's a very old home remedy to cure insomnia. You fill your pillow with hops.
Is that true, Resident Hippies?
Resident hippies.
Our
I'm
wife's
going to try it. I will go
audience
home
here.
tonight and I will fill my pillowcase with hops and we'll see what happens.
See if the hop fairy comes, or
See if
will
the
he
hop
leave you
fairy
a beer?
comes. So,
Leave a ruination under your pillow?
she might. So earlier we talked about the bittering agent that was used prior to the development of hops. I haven't seen anybody here in the chat mention it. We have a guest from the studio audience, actually.
Hemp was your answer. No, that was not correct.
It was a good guess, since
And
the two are
this
so
is-
closely
I'm-
related.
I mentioned before, I'm speaking particularly in Germanic cultures. What became popular first before hops
Hasselhoff.
was called Gruit. Gruit. I think that's how you pronounce it. But Gruit is, I think it was bog myrtle was one of the main ingredients, but basically one of these big, fancy religious leaders slash owners of property that managed a lot of the people. You know, he was a prince or an earl or a king or somebody or another.
Something.
Yeah, basically he had come up with a spice ingredient that was like, okay, I'm going to mix all these, and he made it law that they had to make beer with gruit. And so, of course, it was heavily taxed, just like
That's
anything.
nice.
And they fought for a long time when hops became prevalent from the Normandy culture up north that was bringing in hops and coming in and laying waste to all the other cultures in the area.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So, do we, before we close out, do we want to touch a little bit on the best damn beer?
The best damn beer. We do want to touch on the best damn beer. Best damn beer competition. We mentioned it a few weeks ago, and we're going to mention it again right now. This is a competition that is designed for beers that mainly don't meet style. Now, you can have beers that are quote-unquote BJCP style.
Yeah, if you want to submit a BJCP beer, if it's good, yeah, do it.
Bring it.
Don't
But
bother us any.
We had a beer, for instance, that I had judged with another one of the beer club people, and Brinkley's trying to attack the camera right now, so we may lose our camera here in a second. But yeah, I tried to, I judged a beer, and it was a pale ale that had a lot of rye in it. And we judged it and said, ooh, there's an off flavor. I can't quite pick it. It's not bad. It tastes good, but it just doesn't fit the style, yada, yada. So, I don't know what score we gave it, but we didn't give it high enough marks to go on beyond that. But I had that beer again, knowing what the ingredients were, or knowing that I wasn't looking for a style even was before
Right.
I knew what the ingredients were in it the second time he handed it to me. And it was a really good beer. But that's what goes on in this kind of competition. We're going to pick up the beer. We're not going to be judging it based on if it's caramel.
We're not going to be looking for American versus English hops. We're just going to be looking at, is this beer good?
Which is the most drinkable.
Do we like drinking it? And in fact, my cousins are already preparing for the 2011 Best Damn Beer.
That's good.
They're going to be doing a reprise of their Cardamom Sandalwood, and it sounds like they're going to make a few tweaks that we suggested.
That's good.
So, while you're considering submitting on the Best Damn Beer, and always remember that we are not professionals.
So please, try this at home. We don't have music, but we can
say that.
But we can still say that this was brought to you by Dogleg Productions, and we can play our song.
Oh God, that is awful.